Okay, everyone, we're going to get started. For maybe the one or two people in this room who I haven't met, and certainly for our audience watching online, I will introduce myself. I'm Nicholas Moncho, head of the architecture department here at MIT, and I am truly delighted to welcome you to tonight's lecture, the 34th Arthur Schein Memorial Lecture, and the beginning of our 2025-2026 lecture series. So the Arthur Schein Memorial Lecture and Exhibition Series was established in 1983. We skipped a couple with COVID. That's why the numbers don't line up. By Arthur Schein's wife, Kelly Schein, and his family, friends, colleagues, and clients in his memory. Arthur Schein was an alumnus of the MIT Department of Architecture, receiving his B.Arch degree, which MIT used to give, in 1951. He went on to practice with a family firm in Boston. Kelly Schein, I'm very happy to say, is still with us, even though she's not with us in the room tonight. I would like all of us here to share our thanks with her, along with her sister Barbara and niece Jo, who have been great supporters of this lecture in my time as department head. I'm going to read from my predecessor, Jack Meyer's introduction of the first lecture in 1985. Arthur had a great appreciation of fine architecture. He loved his work. At his untimely death in the fall of 1983, his family decided to establish this annual lecture in his memory. Following the announcement of the series, support came from a great many and established an important endowment that permits us to bring each year one of the world's most distinguished architects to present his or her thought and work. It is a suitable memorial to Arthur's distinction and dedication to architecture. Since then, the lecture has allowed us to bring architects to MIT that include Giancarlo De Carlo, Raffaele Vignoli, Riccardo Legoretta, Zaha Hadid, Ryuhei Nishizawa, Pezzo von Erlichhausen, Angelo Bucci, Tatiana Bilbao, Christian Binswager, Marlon Blackwell, and most recently, Kazuyo Sejima. I would like to just add that particularly on a rainy evening at the beginning, what is no longer quite the beginning of the semester, but not quite yet its middle, the idea of gathering at a inclement time in the city. It sometimes also feels like an inclement time in the world, to dedicate ourselves to the memory of someone who loved his work. And this work we do together seems to me a very important and valuable prospect. So I particularly thank all of you who have come here tonight to help do the work of the department, which is creating a space for the consideration of remarkable people like our guest tonight who also love their work. So to introduce tonight's speaker, I'm going to give the podium to Yolande Daniels, Associate Professor in the Department of Architecture and head of our Lectures and Exhibition Committee, who have done amazing work along with our staff, and particularly Joel Corella, who I was always embarrassed in producing tonight's lecture and this year's series. Yolande.
Thank you, Nicholas. And thank you all for being here and for tuning in. Tonight, I also want to thank the Schein family, myself, and Dean Hashem Sarkis for their support for this series and tonight's talk. Thank you also, Joel, and committee members. So Min and I have known each other since we were graduate students at Columbia University, 25 years, I think it's been. And I'm honored to personally welcome him to MIT's School of Architecture and Planning. I'll embarrass you a little. He's the best dancing partner I've ever had.
Forgot about this.
Yeah, and you'll get a feel of it when you see his talk. So, architect Minsuk Cho established Seoul-based mass studies in 2003, a practice committed to socio-cultural research and built works encompassing diverse scales and contexts. Each project is a unique architectural performance that nurtures the collective past, present, and future that is set within conditions ranging from dense urbanity to natural environments with varying temporal conditions. Their projects cover an expansive range of types from house to pavilion, temple, gallery, museum, university, embassy, factory to tower. Projects currently under construction include the new Seoul Film Center, Danginri Cultural Power Plant, and Yeonhui Seoul Housing. An accomplished curator, Minsuk Cho curated name design at the 2011 Gwangju Design Biennale and served as commissioner and co-curator of the Korean Pavilion for the 2014 Venice Architecture Biennale. That project was awarded the Golden Lion for Best National Participation. Minsuk Cho's work is also included in collections of the Museum of Modern Art, Deutsche Archmuseum, I didn't say that right, Architecture Museum, and the Art Institute of Chicago. Tonight's presentation, Pavilion Effect, is a unique experience through mass studies projects curated by Min for the Schein Lecture and MIT community. It is a deep dive into a single building type and singular practice that reveals a sensitive cultural attunement below the surface of exuberant heterogeneous forms. Please join me in welcoming Minsuk Cho.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I don't need this, right? You can hear me. Thank you, Nicholas, for your warm welcome, and I'm really honored to be part of this Arthur Schein Memorial Lecture Series. And thank you, Yolande, for your decades-long friendship and your profound, let's say, I don't know, we had exchange every now and then has been a really continuous thing, and I think you meet people like that would be really good for the next few decades, I think. I mean, we've known, I think it's more than 25 years, eh? Yeah, it's more like 35 years. Yeah, it's really, I'm very thankful. And yes, as Yolande introduced, I'm going to talk about one particular genre of architecture. The pavilion actually comes from French word, right? It's papillon, which means butterfly. So this could be also, this lecture could be called as a butterfly effect. And it's within the, I mean, it comes from the world around us somehow, the conditions, but also within our own practice, there would have some impact, which has been spanning of our practice, which is 23 years. So I'm gonna go through 20 pavilions, and please don't be scared. This could be a 3-hour talk if I get sidetracked all the time, but I'm sticking to this 1 hour lecture, which is scripted. So with the risk of being a little bit bland, but I'll read through it. And there were quite a few, not because we actively pursue this genre or we are obsessed with it, but perhaps they're loosely defined, quite promiscuous genre of architecture that allow us to explore quite expansive territories, both close and distant, and with spatially and also temporarily. So I'm going to start from the first one. Before my studies, I had a practice in New York with a James Slade called Cho Slade Architecture. But then we split up, and when I moved back to Korea, and then on the third day of our new practice in Seoul, we received an email from MoMA PS1 with an invitation to the Young Architects program. Since they didn't know about our split, James and I decided, okay, hey, this is our last chance to collaborate. This was during the heavy post-9/11 period. Iraq just has been bombed, and SARS was the accelerating border control. We saw this as somehow as a right moment to propose something easily transportable, inspired by the spirit of 1960s drop architecture. We called it a party pad. First, the sky pad. There are two. One of them is sky pad, and simple inflatable canopy with the different surface textures that reacted with light, shadow, color, iridescence, and reflections. It was a summer infrastructure providing sun protection, wind, mist, and rain. Second, the pool pad was a giant inflatable pool using water as if it were paving material. It layered a sand base with two PVC mounds containing sand and hay. Then a giant pool made of clear PVC membrane set on the top, containing shallow water so that one felt like being on a beach, on a sand dune, or on a haystack, except they were protected by clear PVC. Two additional islands, a giant waterbed in an air float, made the archipelago within this pool structure more dynamic, adding more tactile qualities. For us, it was somehow very important to stay within the budget, not only for practical reasons, as we both were starting with a new firm with no money, but because the global outsourcing for our drop architecture idea seemed compelling during the time of heavy borders. It was half the cost to produce in Korea than the US, keeping us within the budget. However, some of the juries were quite scared to bring the entire installation made from outside the US. So we did not win, but it was rumored to be we were the runner-up despite of our suicidal scheme, in a way. Second, Joseph Grima, who was a director of storefront for art and architecture at the time, visited our office and discovered a dusty model of previously rejected proposal, a small dome, 2.5 meters in diameter, intricately assembled with a digitally produced circular component, and he took a photo of it. Soon after, he sent us a photo collage image and asked if he could build it for Storefront's 25th anniversary festival. He wanted to install the structure in a small park across the street, scaled up to 8 meters in diameter with very little budget, so I wasn't sure. And he still wanted to try, so we came up with using hula hoop instead of this digitally produced circular component and connected with the zip ties. And it was a time-specific idea as well. 26 days creating a structure that could be highlighted a potential social gathering space with very little means. Then it would be disassembled and cutting up zip ties and handed over. A few months later, Joseph sent me a photo of Japanese children looking at very proud in front of the smaller version. He told me it was taken them 2 days. I asked him it wasn't any child labor issues. Apparently, they were very happy to participate. Then third opportunity came when the Storefront and Abitare, the magazine, co-hosted an event at Salone in Milan. Joseph and his team developed the structure almost without me noticing. They worked with engineers at Arab to make it structurally sound and cohesive with the larger steel rings, because earlier for the New York one, the ring dome had been anchored to the park fence. And so it wasn't really figured out. And this was Joseph was very proud, and it was like almost the best participant that I don't have to do much, but they kept improving. So I gave my blessing, and it was also great to be under the iconic dome of Galleria Vittorio Emanuele, creating a double dome situation. And it's Salone visitors. It went over 5 days. Then Ring Dome was invited to the Yokohama Triennale themed Time Crevice, an edition focused on time-based artwork. A few events and performances were programmed during the Triennale to take place inside and outside around the Ring Dome. Few years later, Plateau Gallery in Seoul, contemporary art space in Seoul, invited us for a mid-career survey exhibition. They wanted the Ring Dome in their glass pavilion lobby, flanked by 2 Rodin sculptures. We would have preferred to be on the street in front of the gallery. However, since exhibition was during the winter, it makes sense to be inside. Our problem was the visitors had to buy a ticket from outside to enter the glass pavilion. So I told them we would only do the entire show. Invitation will accept it if they made the glass pavilion for free and let us design the new ticket counter inside. The Ring Dome became a Trojan horse. People could see the Rodins and our 13 Saturday events for free, climaxing with the choreographed Mian good friend, absurdly euphoric finale performance. Finally, it moved to Namhae Island's luxury golf resort, which the resort owner, one of our clients, sponsored the fabrication, so a perfect retirement for this well-traveled dome. Next project was for Dialogue City. An outdoor event with the 10 artists during the 2008 Democratic National Convention in Denver, when Obama officially emerged as the Democratic presidential candidate. Initially, we are asked to do another ring dome there, but we are confronted with a vast lakeside site in Denver City Park. With only 3 days for construction due to security reason, this was also still 9/11 sort of a paranoia. We had to do something else, and we came up with a much larger structure to fill the missing forested area and build much faster. So the drop architecture idea came back in the form of pneumatic structure. They behaved like a forest. Denver, the mile-high city, has very strong sun during the day, but becomes drastically windy at night from the Rocky Mountains. We wanted to respond to these contrasting climate conditions. So the forest made out of 45 inflatable columns, each with branches in 3 directions, creating a hexagonal geometry with the round openings, some empty, some with the big hoops made out of same PVC membrane. Our experiment was about controlling the air pressure with air blowers inside in order to make the structure dance beautifully at night. Is this working? Yeah, I think so, quite slow. This is the air forest waking up in the morning, showing how the sort of human species behave around it. And they look quite happy and peaceful. And although this kind of giant structure moves around, especially children, they become quite hyperactive. Almost they're as if they were activating them. Speaking about dance, they were actually dancing together. This is the sort of a hypnotizing moment. I think they're as if they're like abducted by alien or something. People tend to always react to it, looking up. And this was, sometimes it gets quite spooky. It's very contrasting because photo looks quite beautiful, but it's actually in real experience is quite weird because it's very sort of abrupt sometimes. Number 4 is I'm going to talk about collective intimacy. In the 70s, as an elementary school kid, I was quite happy to skip school to watch this kind of a spectacle, military parade in endless asphalt-covered concrete. Later, this space became park. In the 80s, still being a child, I knew I knew actually nothing about this Gwangju Democratic Movement, an uprising from collective anger against the dictatorship. I learned about this tragedy later in college. In June 1987, I was a college student. In front of City Hall, I was part of this historic moment as a student, collective mourning for a student killed by tear gas. This historic moment led to a decade-long gradual transition to civil society. And I was away, it was where I met in New York, Yolande. The traffic roundabout in front of City Hall returned to its purpose right after. 15 years later, a year before I returned to Korea, I was going back and forth from New York. Something completely unexpected happened. This same place filled with a collective euphoria when the Red Devils gathered during the Koreans' 2002 World Cup as a host. We made it to semifinals, and it was home ground benefit, of course, but 1 out of every 7 South Koreans came out in red t-shirts that day. For the first time, Koreans saw their collective self as a massively happy, unlike before. This became a pivotal moment that led to developing collective urban spaces previously discouraged. In 2007, we competed for the Seoul City Hall expansion, proposing to integrate the original Japanese-era building with the new large volumes of varying heights as a unique one-and-many perimeter city block that would define and activate the new City Hall Plaza. We didn't win. The following year, 2008, our choreographer friend Eun Mi-an became our client, or commissioner, who was artistic director for the Spring Palace Festival, an ambitious annual event held by the city, utilizing this new urban space. She invited us to design a temporary palace where people could enjoy festival like kings and queens. So we assembled mostly rented party structures, including 60-meter panoramic water screen, new invention that was using finest water streams that function as a proper projection screen. Eun-mi organized the most inclusive and participatory event spanning all dance and music genres, from popular to experimental. Our part mainly focused on collaborating with the Berlin-based studio Realities United, Jan and Tim Adler, to create a suspended palace canopy of 55-meter diameter, hoop-shaped media cloud hung 16-meter above ground, constructed from 1,001 meter long linear LED lights, all rented equipment. This mass entertainment ran 8 days and nights for millions of people. Later in the same year, another collective gathering occurred, a candlelight rally protecting Korean agriculture. Though the cause differed completely from 2002, the atmosphere of collective intimacy remained similar. Both felt like massive family picnics, whether for soccer or serious political causes. In the 2009 City Hall Plaza filled with the people in yellow in collective mourning over beloved ex-president's voluntary death, another tragedy that came the opposite of collective intimacy, was created by highly skilled people, police, drivers, and containers, demonstrating architects' simple terms, connecting or dividing, intimate or not intimate. Another candlelight gathering in 2017 that led to presidential impeachment. Last December, massive crowd gathered in front of the National Assembly with the LED light sticks instead of candles, resembling a K-pop concert, complete with non-political K-pop music, all amidst a seriously precarious democratic crisis. These two resulted in impeachment this year. Lastly, this is the current state of City Hall Plaza, featuring a lot more trees along the edges, which I think is a good move. Okay, now bigger, faster, cheaper, which has been a holy trinity of South Korea's development for the last 3 decades of 20th century. Though this continues today since 2000, it has diversified into varying combination of scale, pace, and economy. Yes, Jackass is the MTV show about people performing senseless yet challenging stunts in public for entertainment. Some of you might know it, maybe too young. But like this kind of a TV show, we occasionally engage critically with certain kind of problematic, even dangerous condition to achieve meaningful result. And we call it a Jackass stunt. And yeah, it's like, don't try this for your office. It could be, you could bankrupt you, or you'll be sick of architecture. But this South Korea pavilion for the Shanghai Expo 2010 was one such an attempt, looking back. During the Expo's heyday in 20th century, world population quadrupled, meaning 3/4 of human settlement was rapidly built in less than 100 years. Simultaneously, the number of nation-states increased proportionally, forcing the most nations to present themselves as a new collective with a limited history. Korea's Expo history reflects this challenge. In 1893, at the Chicago Expo, first time Korean pavilion was completely lost in translation. In 1900, Paris Expo, the Korean pavilion, the last kingdom's dignified attempt to join the cosmopolitan world, improved yet featured little to curly corner overhangs, possibly because the local French architect had worked in Vietnam. After the Japanese colonization, Korean pavilion re-emerged, only presenting the southern half of former Korea. Kim Jong-un's pavilion for the 60s New York Expo, he worked for Le Corbusier, I'm going to talk about him later. And Kim Soo-gun's work also, who studied in Japan too. I mean, these are two important examples of this modernism through a pavilion at the time. Okay, I'm sorry, okay. First, the Jackass stunt for this Shanghai Expo, the bigger part. Korea is a small country located between superpowers that wants to present itself in a big way. So our site was among the 19 largest along the Hwangpu River. We saw this bigness as an urban opportunity rather than an architectural object. Second, the faster, the challenge. Because at the time, the Korean General Assembly couldn't agree on anything, and the budget decision for the Korean pavilion were postponed until the last minute. Though this left little time for design and construction, we benefited by knowing what other pavilion would look like and understanding the context. We had to avoid circular designs, bowls, upside-down bowls, or stacked bowls, which dominate the surrounding area of our pavilion. The round designs were all taken. Lastly, cheaper. Overall cost-wise, Korea had the second lowest budget after Spain. However, 2/3 went to content, quote-unquote, an animation movie with the K-pop music, leaving only 1/3 for the architecture, half that of Spain. Yet the Expo's 6 months duration and sustainability, quote-unquote, theme, this grueling constraint felt noble. It's like a learning from Las Vegas here. The larger pavilion with the generous budget mostly took a duck approach, and we sat between the moonboat and the pink beetle. Countries with a lower budget produced decorated sheds using Chinese government-provided warehouses and clad them with their facades. We had a decorated shed budget surrounded by big ducks. So we began with the idea of sign as space and space as sign in convergence. It may sound a little bit, someone read too much postmodern theory here. But actually it's quite literal. First, sign as space. Our chosen icon was Hangul, Korea's 26-letter alphabet invented by Sejong the Great based on this democratic knowledge sharing. The letters comprise the simple horizontal, vertical, and diagonal lines plus a circle. These alphabets can be recognized through various building forms, but they are also pragmatic components of the architecture. The horizontal was a second-floor main exhibition space, while the verticals were elevators and escape stair towers, and the diagonals serve as escalators and stairs, the main entry and exit points. We utilized circle as an open stair for the restaurant overlooking Hwangpu River, as it required independent access. Perhaps Korean Pavilion was a decorated shed duck using Hangul pixels, a fractal aluminum composite sheets with Hangul at 3 scales or laser cut, creating fuzzy cloud-like effect. In the industrial age, decorated panel had to be repeated for economy, but in the age of digital production, they cost the same regardless. We just had to design and draw 400 different panels. Beyond the Hangul pixel, the visitors are enveloped by artist Kang Ik-jung's colorful art pixels, we call it, which are printed on the same material again, each different because there are 18 unique poems written by Kang in Korean letters, economical through, again, digital printing. Chinese contractor opened inside the panel upside down since they couldn't read Korean, requiring constant supervision and much more human work for digital production. Through this process, our project architect became quite fluent in Chinese. Urbanistically, it created a semi-covered soccer field-sized open space contained within with 8 different openings to allow visitors to enter or peek in. Now, space as sign is an inversion, equally literal. The soccer field-sized space was 3D pixelated 1 to 300 scale map of Seoul, with mountains as bleachers and the river with a waterfall that we used before. Expo Pavilion typically involve long outside wait for brief, open, disappointing exhibitions inside. Our pavilion offered generosity, shelter from humid weather, beating sun, and rain in nice urban event space. Different Korean performances every 30 minutes entertained visitors during average 3-hour wait. Despite this wait time, it became the second most visited pavilion after China, welcoming 6 million visitors. Maybe because those 3 hours weren't really a waiting time. In 2009, the Guggenheim celebrated its 50th anniversary and invited 200 artists, designers, and architects to propose their dream installations. Frank Lloyd Wright imagined an Arcadian lounge-like space at the ground level with ivy hanging from the guardrails of the spiral. Some of the artists proposed something dramatic or in the spirit of Frank Lloyd Wright. We are by no means artists, so we began with identifying issues or problems to resolve. The museum has 3 major problems, we thought. First, it is too dangerous because the guardrails are too low. Maybe not because Frank Lloyd Wright's fault, but people got much taller over time. And second, there are few places to pause along the slope ramps with relentless dynamism. And third, there are too many tourists who do not come for art, but came for the tourist attraction. To solve these problems, we create a barrier between the void and the spiraling ramp with a membrane equipped with seats where people could rest. We are forcing a pause and trapping the visitors if they choose. We calculate the average number of daily visitors, and each person would be allotted 15 minutes of still time, becoming the part of this collective moment. You could even call it an intimacy, one giant garment, worn by 180 people all looking inward to the void. Most importantly, the real art lovers were able to focus on the art while this celestial bodies movement was happening. This separation resolved all 3 problems, but somehow generate this live action heavenscape ceiling moment. The next one is called Open Pavilion, made for the Anyang Public Art Project, directed by Kyung Park, who founded the storefront. We imagined 70 bent steel tube chairs arranged like a mini amphitheater with a parasol on top, which was then translated into this woven steel tube pavilion, which is you know, this is actually my favorite drawing, like all arcs, but with so much structure and material intelligence. People enter the structure and it cradles them. It's ergonomic for different body sizes and that engage with it. During the previous Ring Dome event, I questioned whether structure itself could accommodate seating area instead of having to bring additional chairs. So it became like a ring dome with a built-in seating for 70 people. And it's also, in a way, it has this kind of a heavenscape art trap, but less vertical, but people suspended in the air, generating quite an intimacy with human body as architecture. So it's an amalgamation. I had the opportunity to collaborate with Emilio Greco and Peter Scholten, choreographer, dramaturge, partners of EGPC based in Amsterdam. This piece was titled Beyond, produced by Suwon Art Center in Korea. They brought me in 2 weeks before the premiere as a set designer. This was sketched after I saw their rehearsal. It's a timeline of 8 dancers on stage with differently trained bodies from China, Japan, Singapore, and Korea with their own dance traditions, Spanish flamenco, Italian Baroque ballet, and Indian Kalaripayattu, which is a martial art form. They appear one by one, accumulating on stage. They gradually influence each other, what they call contamination process. They asked me to design a backdrop with $7,000 budget and requested that background would jump out somehow, at times to become the foreground, engulfing the dancers. I was fascinated by this idea. For another kind of contamination, in parallel with the dance piece, we began researching and selecting 8 fabrics, doing experiments to see how they respond to front and back light individually and overlapped, etc. The piece starts from introducing all dancers from red velvet curtain of the proscenium arch closed, and then the piece starts, and then they start kind of appearing, begin to meander into space. And on our background reveals slowly with what we call Gerhard Richter squeezy painting moments or Rothko moments with changing lights and depths, from flat to graphically striking moments to very deep sculpted darkness in flux. This is when the backdrop drastically reveals its stoic monumental presence. Massive undulation is further exaggerated by strong lights from the side. This is when background becomes foreground as being visually intense, seemingly jumping out with very loud music while dancers are standing still for quite some time. Then in one moment in the background, one stretchy fabric literally jumps out as a garment for one of the dancers as a foreground. And it slowly ends undramatically without colors like an East Asian ink painting, gradually revealing the backstage, the beyond space, with just a simple hanging light comes from the above. Number 9, this is another Dutch collaboration with Amsterdam-based firm called Next Architect. We enter a competition for a student pavilion in the center of Erasmus University along with 4 other Dutch firms. It is a 4-story building with a central auditorium in the basement next to the 2-level basement parking podium on one side. It's a simple concrete structure with 4 mega columns supporting a hovering Virendeer wooden canopy. The site has a level change and the 4 edges of the building engage with the topography and slope of the campus. The lower campus level facing the pond cafes along the edges, and the upper campus level has meeting rooms and so on, with a central patio that features photovoltaic glass roof that opened up to harvest the sun in the summer and become a greenhouse in winter. From this level, one can access the habitable wooden canopy with an office, meeting room, and the balcony above. On the submission day, our Dutch partner was 18 minutes late due to the heavy traffic jams from historically unusual snow. Shortly after, this sad news was followed by the news that another competitor delivered their proposal 40 minutes after us. It turned out to be the firm that I used to work for, OMA. Our Dutch partner began appealing the competition organizers that this was an inevitable situation like natural disaster. Close to it. Thankfully, the 3 other Dutch competitors on time signed the letter supporting our position as well. While this discussion was happening, I flew to the Netherlands, hoping to present. Upon arrival at the airport, only to discover that committee decided not to accept either two of the late schemes. So I met with my old Dutch boss instead and consult each other over this tragedy. So I have never shown this project because it was so traumatic. So it's the first time I'm showing this. Now the time helps them. This site is within the Sajik Public Park in Gwangju City, which has a Sajikdan. Sajikdan means podium used for annual harvest rituals to land and crop deities during the Joseon Dynasty. Located only 2 minutes from the sacred podium next to the badminton court, we began with placing a simple stereotomic cylinder volume. A square volume matching the exact size of the Sajikdan podium creates a small courtyard within, and this inversion continues with the Boolean subtraction, a catalog of various geometric forms contrasting with the 4 steps and strict axial arrangement for the sacred annual rituals. Some of the 3-dimensional cutout function as water fountains and benches for the watching badminton games and lockers and spaces allowing people to enter bright sand courtyard, exploring like a play structure. We called it a vacant house, inspired by my childhood memory of using old abandoned houses as playground. This generated a necessary secular everyday energy that complements the highly spiritual energy of the Sajik Park. 9 years later, in 2020, we completed the much bigger Space K Seoul Museum, a contemporary art space within a park that also designed with a similar subtraction strategy that draws people in, making the museum roof as an extension of the public park. Now I'm going to show you a large pavilion in the form of a butterfly on the resort island. And we never suddenly get inspired by looking at butterfly and design something like, wow, this would be cool shape, you know. But instead, we started with the idea of a plan form. Flat buildings that have dramatic forms in plan, exploring how they are experienced on a particular site. In plan, the 4 arcs each perform 4 distinctive tasks, addressing 4 directions: north, dramatic entry; south, the view to the archipelago and distant ocean; east, embrace of the rocky terrain; the west, the view of the scape, especially at sunset. The 4 arcs are created by 2 bending linear spaces, the west wing, shorter and wider, and for dining, and the east wing, longer and narrow, spa, hugging the rock mountain. It has an outdoor bath at both tips for the men's and women. In between 2 wings is what we call open lobby. The entire perimeter of the butterfly form has a 3-meter deep overhang. The unique aspect is that 3-meter overhang gradually changes direction vertically, depending on its relationship with the sun, much like a baseball cap brim facing south, like they go down and then flips up like a rally cap brim facing north. Quite unlike the bird eye view that you were looking at, experienced at a ground level is this platform building. Because it's flat, balances modesty and flamboyance in the landscape depending on distances. The further away it is viewed, is more calm and subtle it appears within its surroundings due to its flatness, saving its drama until the last moment. When moving further in, you confront the open lobby created by convergence of 4 ripples in arcs, merging to create an opening with a reflection pool. Curved steel beams sit above a concrete ripple canopy skin, holding them together, supported by slender round steel columns. The structural integrity comes from their combined performances, and it appears almost as if the curved steel beams are held together by vacuum-formed soft white blankets. It appears even softer with the reflection of water. These framed sites are constantly changing depending on the weather. In fact, these 2 pictures are taken just 10 minutes apart. The building isn't an object, but a framing device to appreciate changes also through the positioning of the body. It's their kind of fashion company, husband and wife. Their retirement plan. They sold their entire operation to enjoy what they like to do. But then they started a new brand now, so they cannot stop working. This is the most dramatic view captured beneath the bending canopy as if viewed through a fisheye lens. And the same platform canopy appears more relaxed when viewed from outside looking up. So now we're kind of more than halfway. So far, I've shown you our earlier pavilions with a more tendency for the distant utopian impulse for nowhere or everywhere. At a certain point, simultaneously, we started to explore and diverge toward Jeongja, which is the Korean word that means pavilion, which has more to do with the close and specific location somewhere with an intimate dialogue with the nature or surroundings. It is often utilized as a setting for various art forms such as literature, music, and painting. The Jeongja is small scale for more individual activity. And let's say writing poetry in solitude, often associated with the exilers. We have another word for collective pavilion. For bigger gathering in nature is a nugak. It's like what you just saw, this butterfly-shaped pavilion. One view of the pavilion is of the other, another place and time, whether it's fully resembling Roman ruins or chinoiserie gazebo or something sci-fi alien. They are quite obsessed with the other world. In contrast, this other tradition, the Korean one, focus on the here and now. Maybe the difference is that one believes in heaven or afterlife, while the other is more about making the most out of what is on earth in this life. We have explored and oscillated between these two notions. And around an existing round building called Osolok Tea Museum in Jeju Island, we have completed these pavilions in 8 different tasks over 12 years from 2011. It's almost like among them, 3 can be called pavilions that ended up creating an ensemble like a constellation of a go board with stones placed at different times. And I'm going to just show you one pavilion among them, which is called Tea Stone, which is the very first one created for the tea ceremony classroom. Jeju Island was traditionally an exile site for important political figures and intellectuals from different times from 13th century. And this site was not far from 9-year exile site of Chusa Kim Jung-hee, a renowned 19th century scholar and artist, also important for his distinctive freestyle calligraphy and also as a tea enthusiast. And this tea field is also linked to the trail of Chusa's exile path. So one of his iconic paintings is on the right. It's called Sehando, National Treasure, with his writing about one's dignity being revealed through hardship. Though the depiction of this humble house surrounded by trees, although the house is drawn in a deliberately childish manner, it clearly illustrates the relationship with nature, discreetly hidden, yet in contact with its surroundings, with openings peeking at both ends. The tea stone is on a slope side and made of the polished black concrete that shares the material qualities of an inkstone, an important tool for his artistic medium of ink, used in either calligraphy or ink painting without colors. At times, the reflection of the black polished concrete and black glass on 3 sides makes the building appear as one material. The only clear glass double skin is on the eastern side, facing the Gotjawal forest. The outer glass of this 3.5 meter tall wall is 48 millimeter thick laminated glass that is only held at the ground, barely meeting a beam held by 2 11 meter long cantilever beams, like a silent acrobat. Inside, this clear glass wall is framed by 2 black glass walls on both sides and black mirrors cladding the 2 cantilever beams and framing the Gotjawal hillside. And there's another building almost identical, like a mirror image, overlooking this pavilion, like another house from his Sehando painting. Okay, so now we're going to talk about world peace idea. Back in 2010 Shanghai Expo, it was the first time for North Koreans to participate in an expo event. It was a few hundred meters away from the South Korean pavilion along the street next to Iran and Iraq pavilions, jokingly nicknamed as the Axis of Evil Street, which demonstrated Shanghai's inclusiveness of expo spirit with a historic record-breaking 200 participating nations. Pavilions on this street are all rented, like what I called decorated shed category in Venturian sense. And I was quite nervous entering the North Korean territory for the first time. However, unexpectedly, I was overwhelmed by a powerful emotion that came from a familiarity, the obvious realization that both countries share a much longer history than the divide. What amplified the intensity of my emotion was that the North Korean pavilion was the same idea, basically, that bringing their capital city, Pyongyang, as a miniature with a river and the bridge. The difference was a socialist realism style rather than a SimCity pixel style of Korean pavilion that we did. And then a few years later, I created an exhibition titled Cross-Eye View, the Korean Pavilion for the Venice Biennale 2014. And for the first time, Rem Koolhaas, as a director of the Biennale, gave a mandate for every national pavilion to work with the same theme, titled Absorbing Modernity from 1914 to 2014. I quickly realized that in 1914, South Korea did not exist. Instead, the entire Korean pavilion was Korean Peninsula was one country at the beginning of the Japanese occupation period. I realized that showing only the history of South Korea would be missing half of the story. So I proposed the first architecture exhibition by both Koreas, looking back at 100 years of shared and separate history, whatever that could be about. I knew it was beyond me, so I prepared a plan B, not by two Koreans directly, but mediated by others who have been interested in both countries, ones with a North Korean access. So I had 14 months to work with. And then right after being selected with this proposal, I discovered in full detail that amazing story about what Korean pavilion happened. It became the last pavilion in Giardini in 1995, the Biennale centennial year. Despite over 20 countries competing for this commemorative edition, Korea prevailed thanks to crucial connections formed after artist Nam Jun-baek's 93 Golden Lion win for Germany, involving the Venice mayor Massimo Cacciari and two architects, Korean one, Minsuk Cho and Franco Mancuso, local Venetian architect. According to the late Minsuk Cho, when I interviewed him, Cacciari was very excited that pavilion could be used for both Koreas, much loftier purpose than art and architecture, something that could contribute to the world peace. This idea progressed and had much potential because then South Korean president had an agreement of then US President Bill Clinton to visit North Korea. All of this halted when Kim Il-sung, the founder of North Korea, died in 1995, abruptly leaving two countries in semi-crisis situation. So I therefore realized the reason why this pavilion was named the Korean Pavilion, not the South Korea Pavilion. Without even knowing it, I had self-imposed the unfulfilled mission that Nam Jun-baek had promised to the mayor of Venice, Massimo Cacciari. And then I think I'm going to just skip this is quite quickly, but basically we have also designed this 19-corner building. This building was very complicated, and somehow this 19-corner become the tool to express a word, because it was quite contrasting. The other pavilion in Venice, Giardini, had this almost autonomy of architecture with the very simple plans and four corners, and this one was all about grafted onto this what used to be a toilet, and then also you have to avoid touching the tree, so it became this very complicated sort of a plan, which was notoriously nightmareous to exhibit anything. Anyhow, we fully use that and as a sort of a machine to tell the story with every corner, also inside and out. So 19 corner become 38 corners, and but also majority of money was spent for the bringing all the 37 participants to Venice, because we really wanted to create a reality than just more than an exhibition itself. So it kind of become this sort of continuing kind of engagement of these different participants who got to know each other. And of course, our recognition got help too, because it was quite taboo thing for showing North Korean anything, but then it became almost trendy and kind of went on. And then, but the most important thing was for me, this butterfly effect was that North Korean ambassador from Rome visited months after in a kind of a stealth visit, taken by one of the participants, Milanese photographer Belgio Giosso. So I was quite happy and kind of still make me dream about this. Maybe one day North Korean participation could be possible. You know, why not Expo? You know, I mean, Expo, it happened to Expo before. That was very first time, you know. So I kind of went on with that. And then since that Venice show, I've been involved with the DMZ Dreaming of Earth project in 2015. And this ambitious ongoing project is collaborated initiated by Korean artist Choi Jae-eun, who brought together various creatives, artists, architects, biologists, and scientists. This project aimed to protect and nurture rich ecosystem, untouched territory, 4-meter wide buffer zone between North and South Korea, cutting through the entire peninsula. Collaborators include architect Shigeru Ban, Bijoy Jain, Ihu Hwan, Olaf Eliasson, Lee Bo, as well as many scientists and fashion designers and also activists in various aspects. And it's been kind of snowballing thanks to Choi Jae-eun, artist. And our task was to imagining seed bank and ecology library as a possible joint product of a project between the two countries. So we suggest repurposing one of the 4 tunnels made by North Koreans in the 1970s, which is now the dark tourism site. We choose Tunnel 2 and to appropriate the Vault for Life and Knowledge, an archive for seeds and ecological knowledge in analog form. So as a starting point, we would create a 10-meter deep hole where 2 tragic man-made lines border and the tunnel intersects. This acts like a landscape acupuncture, doing the landscape to what acupuncture does for the body, relieving tension and renewing energy flow and making a new beginning. Slowly, one by one, the large granite blocks excavated from the hole can be moved to both sides, North and South Korea, and creating a square plinth for the 2 future preparation facilities for seed bank and ecology library. And this year, Choi Jae-eun launched naturerules.net, a beautifully designed website and extensive information about DMZ and ecology. You can check out from your smartphone. You can even support by buying a seed bomb, which is 70 cents each, as a collective nurturing of the landscape that involves the reforestation of the DMZ area, facilitated by drones. Che will present a retrospective later this year at the Seoul National Museum of Art. It will be another campaign as well as a beautiful art show. So this is plugging in. And again, the Venice show, this number 15, is about the survival. One of the images exhibited was Kim Jong-up's French embassy building in Seoul. It was a recent photo taken for the show. And the image was not very impressive. You can see right side above. But it had to be included because architecture, this building has been canonized by Korean architecture historians as the most important work of the 20th century. It is an early work by Kim Jong-up, completed in 1961, who worked for Le Corbusier in Paris for 4 years in the 50s. The original embassy ensemble sat on top of Gentle Hill, 15 meter high, as a cascading triptych. Residence on top, pavilion on the with the curved roof, and office annex. The pavilion's curved roof was most distinct feature, clearly resonating with the Le Corbusier's unbuilt Governor's Palace of Chandigarh, which Kim worked on. Yet its abstract spherical surface cut into square plan also resembles traditional Korean roof profiles. Kim studied how traditional Korean mountain temples engage topography, evident in his embassy ensemble. However, unlike traditional temples, which nestle modestly in valleys, this ensemble sits prominently on the hilltop. With the Han River once visible 3 kilometers away, its positioning echoes Le Corbusier's Acropolis ideal rather than Korean precedents, temples. It represented a unique blend of influences. Over the 6 years since its completion, this French territory has grown in ad hoc manner to increase capacity. One of the significant deviations was the pavilion, which nearly collapsed due to its poor construction quality. It was recreated as a tragically compromised design in the 70s. That's why we could not get a proper picture for the Venice show. Not only this territory has grown, but the surrounding city has grown from single-story wooden houses to 16-story towers. This transformed what was once hilltop complex into now nestled in an artificial valley, ironically creating a condition more aligned with the placement of traditional Korean temples. So we collaborate with the French architect Yoon Tae-hoon and Satie, French firm, and won the competition. And basically, we had to add this larger structure. And basically, our idea was we're playing this supporting role to this very important historic building while restoring this pavilion. And basically, 2 elements are: one is the unrecognizable annex building was replaced by much stretched long, 60-meter long horizontal building with the same sectional relationship. And these are sort of most public function like exhibition, visa service, and the council meeting rooms. And second, the 10-story tower is more about mediating with the other city parts that is surrounding, but also make this verticalized city has a presence from outside. And these two original pavilions are responding to our two additions, horizontal, vertical buildings. So we basically had to create this backdrop at the same time. Yeah. And pavilion was built exactly, but of course we had to do all this now new seismic requirements, and so it was a steel column was embedded through this brutalist concrete building appearance, and also post-tension roof as well. And basically, lastly, these apprentices of Kim Jong-up, still in their 70s and 80s, they invited the pavilion, French embassy. Ambassador announced this rebuilt pavilion as a Kim Jong-up pavilion. And building that has survived through 3 reconstructions over 62 years, within its context, transformed from mountain to valley. So it's quite a kind of went through changes. And this story kind of expanded into, I call it rocky riverscape become flat, which examines changes along the Han River, which is about this, all the rocks sort of broken into rubbles to create riverbanks to have a flood control, and it's a very brutal process. And we basically have a first thermal power plant, which was built in 1931, and it replaced by plant 2 and 3 in 50s, and 4 and 5 in the 1970s. And then recently they replaced it with the number 6, which is a unique underground power plant. And these two structures become available. So then competition was about Plant 5 to keep that as an industrial heritage, while Plant 4 full-scale gutting out and for the space for culture center. So for us, it was a quite unique opportunity to create this significant public space with cultural ambition, which is now trapped between the high-speed road and high-rise apartments, sort of cladding on both sides of the rapidly flattened territory of this Han River. And yeah, but this was also, although it was so close to the river, but there was no Han River view on the ground level. So basically our idea was to connect these two turbine halls as a podium, 130-meter long public space that has a direct connection to from the outside through escalators and large elevators. So this is more recent construction photos. And then ground level, the turbine hall 4 is converted into black and white theater, a black box theater, and the turbine hall 5 is preserved, and this could also connect, this could be connected through vertical lift doors with very long space that could be appropriated as various exhibitions and markets and music festivals and so on. And basically, this is more recent photo of what's happening, and hopefully we'll finish this by next year with the large public space above, with almost like this pavilion is a completely appropriated pavilion in a way. And in a way recreating this old rocky mountain, and this podium of we created become like that with a great view. And the next one is our pandemic project, because it was remote location, but somehow, despite of challenging budget and accessibility, we took it because I had developed this ungrounded conviction that once I saw it, I couldn't sleep, and somehow I had to do this project, because we don't do it, somebody else is going to ruin it somehow. So this is usually, it's a very bad thing. Of course, it's very ungrounded. But as soon as we signed the contract, with COVID began, so it became really an amazing experience. Also, I can focus, and I cannot travel abroad. So, And we started out by looking into what was available around the site, which is a vesselscape, which was quite impressive, more than 2,000 of them made by one person over time. And we had the opportunity to work with this master do some architecture like chimneys and so on. And now it's 2,500 of them, like slowly is growing. And in choosing the location, we wanted a discrete place, so we kind of have this hidden location beyond this vesselscape. And we didn't remove any cedar trees. 2 of them are intersecting. And then only 300 meters away, there was this stone plinth, was 10th century temple podium. And of course, we could not do anything like that with our given budget, but we found a granite stone quarry beyond the mountain, which is only 1 kilometer away. So we took all the discarded stone scrapes from cutting for like really nothing, $150 per truck. And we stay at this old wooden house nearby, like thanks to Airbnb, and we're inspired by this 3 meter by 3 meter structure as a model for slender steel structure. This is what we call solo width moment, which is we're using the steel structure, but same as this wooden structure. And then we learned that traditional way of making ondo, heated floor, was economically available in this region due to remaining old houses. So we create a small room within the pavilion using this method. Earth floor with the brick and stone furnace below, finished with the paper. We adapted this layered house concept, an old northern region house typology reconfigured for efficient energy use. And small courtyards serve as a hearse with a chimney made by vessel master, allowing cross ventilation, and for small stair leading to the roof, which become another passage to slope topography of the site. This research resulted in something like vernacular Farnsworth House. We joked about it. And this year marks the 25th anniversary of the Serpentine Pavilion program, and I was happy to design last year's pavilion. Quite an unexpected opportunity, which felt almost like a riddle. And we started from looking back. Each of the previous architects has responded to the site in a unique way, yet an underlying narrative seemed to emerge as if they explicitly or implicitly reacted to our globally changing society. When programs started in year 2000 with such optimism about new millennium, none of you maybe might remember much, but Google has just started it. We thought we all become connected and very happy celebrating diversities, and smartphone appeared in 2007 with few years later and so on. Then quarter century with 2 dozens of Serpentine Pavilion later, we're at a quite different place. When looking at the plan forms of the previous pavilion, 8 of them have been circular and round, 6 rectangular, so 2/3 with complete geometry, and the rest free form. Looking at our own pavilion that you've been looking at starting from 2003, almost during the same time period, we have proposed many circular plan structures, also about 2/3 of them. I was also reminded that this obsession with the circular form happened not only diachronically, but also synchronically in Shanghai 2010, all at once around us. In fact, we can trace this tendency toward utopian completeness through the entire 20th century, from Bruno Taut, Buckminster Fuller, hippie era drop city, and so on. So first, we decided to give the most overused central territory of the Serpentine Lawn a rest by creating a void, and begin to look at what could happen along the periphery. Each structure, or what we call an island, is a simple. Each outer tip of island is unique in shape, form, and scale, wide to narrow, high to low, small to large. However, toward the center, all 5 islands have the same end condition, the same arc length at the same height, coming together to form a 8-meter diameter circular void. Each island was given specific program, a distinct function, yet remained flexible. Gallery is with a sound installation by Jang Young-gyu. Auditorium, largest room, generous gathering area, and performance venue. Again, Eunmi performed this piece called North Korean Dance. Amazing. Library speaks to Korean literary traditions, featuring the Singaporean artist Hee Man Chong's conceptual serial work titled Library of Unread Books. Also, digging into the history of Serpentine South Gallery, we learned that it was built as a tea house, the gallery itself. So finally, we designed one island to be the tea house to give a form. And lastly, the play tower is a narrow 7-meter tall structure, draws children and parents alike. These 5 covered spaces alternate with 5 open spaces in between them, with the madang, what we call open space. All 11 spaces maintain distinct characters, yet stay connected. The pavilion created an appropriately scaled space with balance of openness and enclosure, distance and intimacy, allowing occupants to be apart or be together. The central void is a reminiscent of a traditional Korean madang, a small courtyard of traditional Korean house, a space that accommodates a variety of rich spatial narrative, ranging from daily activities of individuals to special occasions and moments, to large collective rituals throughout the changing seasons. It's like a roundabout for park activities that one can access from many different directions and inflect from the center. Together with the sound, taste, and scent, tactile experience were generated by soft pine wood structure that function also as benches and counters. Natural timber was used on this lawn for the first time, sourced from Surrey, just 30 kilometers away. We explore modern joinery techniques and intricate mechanical joinery, creating a dialogue between vernacular and contemporary. We also use the natural stone paving, lightly fixed for reuse, and low carbon reusable precast concrete for the foundation and plinth. Everything is a dry construction. The plinths utilize the topographic changes installed at the same height, while the entire site slopes about 70 centimeters. At the highest level, they are used as benches in the auditorium, starting at the 30 centimeter height that gradually become 1 meter tall on the other end to be used as a counter for the tea house. The pavilion is contextual, abstract, site-specific, and siteless at the same time. The pavilion will travel to unknown future locations. Instead of being a giant sculpture using surroundings only as a backdrop, we wanted to welcome and anticipate complex conditions and obstacles to create dialogues. These 5 islands can be reassembled into 5 factorial, 120 constellations to adapt. In fact, there will be yet announced second landing with a new constellation in the spring of 2026, and there will be another one followed at least 1 year after. So we're excited to show 3 times. Poet Kim Hae-sun wrote a beautiful poem for the catalog. She ends the poem with the verse that the fist that unfolds on its own, resonating the idea of incompleteness. Can you do 2 more? Okay, I'll do very quickly. Okay, so what I have is the 2 recent projects in progress. I start out with my favorite pavilion in Korea. In the 17th century, the scholar, poet, and government official Yoon Sun-do, from powerful Yoon family known for their land reclamation enterprise and effort in the Haenam, southern tip of southern Jeolla province, voluntarily exiled himself to the remote Bogil-do Island, where he wrote seminal poem series, 어부사시사, a set of emotional, impressionistic prose about enlightened living with the nature away from secular world. Bogil-do was his Shangri-La. Within the valley on this island, he created 3 remarkable sets of structures within, which is called Buyongdong Wonlim. Wonlim is an interesting Korean compound word made of 2 words, garden and forest. It shows a unique Korean attitude toward gardens, not as a separate man-made environment that is set apart from nature, such as forests, but as a boundless, expanded entity. In this Wonlim, with valley in between, his residence sits on one side, on the other side, facing the sides Dongcheon Seoksil, set up 2 tiny pavilions, one for sleeping below and the other to read books above, built atop a rock. These 2 contrasting structural ensembles across the valley effectively create a sometimes majestic Gesamtkunstwerk opera theater. For example, when he greeted guests who came from far away to visit his house from the mainland, a distant drummer across the valley in this little pavilion played welcoming drum music. However, the Buyongdong Wonlim's masterpiece is a Seyeonjeong Pavilion. It is a common pavilion typology in this region with 9 square grid plan. Kim Jung-up's adapted the French pavilion was also 9 square. I think he kind of was aware of that. And he had a heated ondol floor at the center square with the screen walls, which kind of relates to our layer house idea of our vinegar pavilion. It's surrounded by small yet free-form lake with massive rocks. Walking around edge of this man-made lake with shifting views, one experienced the dynamic, even violent energy of these rock compositions. It feels like a scene was created not by humans, but by natural force, like some catastrophe had just happened. Within the pavilion, hovering and overlooking elegantly like a butterfly or an angel. I somehow think of profoundly ambivalent Paul Klee's Angelus Novus, the angel of history described by Walter Benjamin. Yun's voluntary exile was caused by his tumultuous time and his disappointment at the emperor's surrender to the Qing dynasty's invasion in 1636, which followed after the 2 centuries of kingdom progressive sort of Renaissance golden age, and he never returned to his public service. A remarkable aspect of this environment is that it was created mostly by working with found conditions instead of defying them, such as massive rocks on site and complex topography, in very pragmatic terms. In fact, the main purpose of this endeavor was for rice farming on an island where water is scarce, although it's now mostly remembered as a place where wrote an era-defining poetry through dialogue with his friends, quote-unquote, moon, trees, and 7 massive rocks, and so on. Kyoto's Ryoanji Temple, well known, built 2 centuries earlier with rocks, makes a radical contrast for a totally controlled stage set-like introspective micro-universe, while Seonjeong's pragmatism and appropriation strategy to create boundless space despite its modest scale. And our project is basically 3.5 centuries later, in the 1980s, this Daewoo Group established medical service for the Nohwa-do, which is an island connected to Yun's Bogil-do Island with a small bridge. Basically, it was a medical service that when Korea was so poor that these medical service couldn't reach out, so private companies kind of provided this, and it was a very honorable kind of purpose with a funeral home, with especially for many modern-day exilers without family. So they built a medical facility and 6 small 3-story, 6-unit apartment for doctors. But then later, Korea became richer, so it became an obsolete thing, and it was all well connected with the mainland. And then they start to develop recently with the Daewoo Foundation, together with the well-renowned curator Kim Sun-jung's direction, with a landscape designer and several artists working together to transform this remaining structure as a sort of a cultural facility, mainly for art, but together with the community facility. So basically, we kind of envision how this facility can grow, but also one of our very first project is this old 3-story apartment, we're turning into an exhibition space with the small pavilion on top, because this is the only place in this territory to overview, look above the pine tree forest to see beyond their territory toward the Yunsan-do's Bogil-do Island. Basically, it kind of does similar thing what the Dongcheon Seoksil took the rock with the small pavilion on top. We took this existing 3-story building as a sort of our found rock there. And then, and then we have this another pavilion on top of it, which will follow this 9-square grid with precast concrete structures that would also create a horizontal exhibition space later. And basically, the central government is helping that. And the last one, it's in the middle of it. But interesting thing is that southern Jeolla region, there is this important garden forest locations, and this is another one of these 3 main garden forest site, which respond to this Yunsan-do's Bogil-do garden forest. And we somehow, coincidentally, we've been now working on this quite historic landscape site, and next to same tea field that we worked on for Jeju Island. So basically, this is a site with incredible mountain, which is, we call it Moonrise Mountain, Wolchusan Mountain. And basically, let's see, recent project. Yeah, this this relates to these genealogies of a Korean intellectual culture who was in exile in different times. And basically, Yoon Sun-do, I mentioned in this Bogil-do Island, was a great-great-grandfather of the Yoon Do-seo, which is scholar and painter, and who was a great-grandfather of Chung Ya-kyung, who is exiled to this, our last site, who is a pivotal late dynasty progamist and inventor and early Catholic. He advocated political, economic, and legal reform. Anyway, he mentored two figures, who is Chusa Kim Jung-hee, a scholar artist behind our T-stone pavilion, one we show you, we've done 12 years ago. And Choi Sun-sa, who is a monk, tea connoisseur, and poet who lived near this last site. And when Chusa, the calligrapher, was in Jeju for exile, this monk was in this site, the last one, and their friendship ensured Chusa could enjoy the tea, because at the time the Jeju wasn't tea, there was no tea farming existed. Anyhow, this overlapping relationship spanning generations and bound by shared interest in tea and poetry and painting reveal how pavilion function as a node for in larger cultural networks, connecting landscape, ideas, and people across time. And somehow we're eager to be part of this history in this century, continuing in a modern way. So basically, this is a conclusion part, but we've dealt with this world around us with more than 20 pavilions over 20 years. And this spectrum of iteration ranges from small to large, temporary to permanent, lightweight to massive, singular to multiple. Each project is driven by invention and or discovery, transforming constraints into architectural motivator, yielding encounters between humans and dialogue with the surroundings, environment. Through some, I highlighted the purposes that sometimes expand beyond uses, sometimes very lofty words like world peace. And these inventions reveal how tangible context in architecture can be explored in diverse ways, encompassing material selection and construction modes with awareness of specific temporality. And there are also stories of a tragedy or survival or exiles in constellations. At the same time, each pavilion attempts to respond to evolving political and social cultural moment. The intangible context in architecture is rigorously interrogated across various moments in history, looking backward and forward simultaneously for performative qualities that create specific experiences. I also try to reveal how divergent approaches inform one another and the trajectory of practice itself over time. The work is constantly confronted with oppositional notions, distance and close, utopian and real, everywhere and somewhere, or both, with aspiration toward the generative cartography of architectural possibilities. Thank you very much for bearing with me. Thank you, thank you. Thank you for listening.
Is there time just for...
I went over too long, I think.
Go back to studio, but I think it would be a disservice to the space we've created here not to open it up for one or two questions before we go. So if you're willing to take a couple of questions. So for the benefit of the Zoomsters in the recording, raise your hand and Joel will come to you.
Thank you, Minsuk, for the talk. It was excellent and very entertaining.
Thank you.
I'm struck by how well mapped your work seems to be with your personality, or my first impression of your personality, and sort of how you present and speak and how you dress and everything. And so the work seems to be so upfront, stylish, matter of fact, sometimes even literal in the case of the Shanghai Pavilion or the Void in the Serpentine Pavilion. And it reminds me of how you speak about it. And I guess my question is, one, does this reading resonate with you? And two, if so, how do you work in the office? Is that something that's sort of intentional, that true to personality? or is it more implicit, or none at all?
Very interesting question, thank you. And nice observation maybe, because I don't necessarily think that architecture is a tool for self-expression. I think last semester I gave a talk at Harvard. It was much longer, almost like a very long-term relationship with the site and people who's involved with it. And it's really with the purpose and much longer term. It's like an old marriage. And we have this multiple marriage situation with different projects simultaneously happening. But Pavilion has been, I think this is when you can, because it's like a very small injection, very intense, almost like an affair. While this long marriage is happening, and I think there are a lot of you can react for the moment, because a lot of this pavilion situation, as I said, it was very loose, promiscuous genre, and you can, because it's really of course there are some substantial let's say structure that can last longer and took much longer than others, but they're like small moments, like they're very few, because even it's not a pavilion by definition, but I included this stage set design because it travels and it's kind of has a very time specific ideas. And so I want to just highlight these various way of somehow expressing certain idea, whether it's my personal, but I don't really, I mean, I'm not a kind of architect like who can proudly say like my architecture is about blah, 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 blah. It's usually comes with, of course, we have, it also is a collaboration work because of the diversity here, because I kind of credit all these collaborators from, what was it, there are choreographer, dramaturgy to artists. There are many artists involved that I admire, which I'm very lucky, and there's an engineer also involved, and what else? I mean, architecture. So it's just an amalgamation of these many things. Did I answer your question? Yeah. Anybody who also interested in? Maybe all you want to have a dinner? Please, Ryan. Thanks for coming again.
Oh no, I really enjoyed the lecture, and it's really interesting to see. It's really interesting in your work that you have such a large body of temporary structures or pavilion-style structures, but then also a lot of works that you haven't spoke on today, which are permanent and very site-specific structures. And I wondered if there's something about going through the process of all these pavilions that that contributes to the way that you develop some of your other projects that you haven't shared today that are more enduring and sort of long-term projects.
I didn't catch this part.
I was asking if the way that you develop your pavilions and these sort of sometimes very projects with a short time span, if the way that you develop those projects contributes to some of the other projects you haven't shown today that are more enduring sort of long-term projects.
How these pavilion short-term projects contribute to longer-term projects?
Yes, like the way of developing these types of projects, I assume, is very different from the way that you develop, for example, the monastery that you have in Seoul. I wonder if there's learnings from these sort of pavilion-style projects that you bring to those other projects.
Okay, that's okay. Sorry, I didn't, because it's kind of echoing. Anyway, yeah, I think one of these vacant house project was somehow I showed how it's expanded later as a museum. It's kind of blown up scale, but I think pavilions often you can expand later. It's not something that we plan, but that's another butterfly effect, because you can be experimental with it and fully, be precise about the very specific things, because architecture, like real buildings, comes with a lot of complexities, right? But there's kind of a pure moment you can experience, and I think that has been a very invigorating process, because my practice, of course, today, I wanted to show you as a juxtaposition of like big projects, and these things are in time sequence. But then I just realized just by itself, pavilions are just so much as it's taken in way over time today. But I think it would be also interesting to present it that way. Yeah, more so. It's okay?
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, welcome. Please.
Hi, thank you for the very generous presentation. My question is that it seems that most of your pavilion are having this very long interpretation of cultural lineage.
Yeah.
And How much of that is that do you block out a certain amount of time frame, like 1 or 2 months, just on literature research, or like do you always go on site to investigate to find out the narrative or the history of the site before you start designing? Yeah, just like how much research do you kind of apply before you do these kind of interpretations?
Interesting. No, I think it's somehow what I discovered through looking at preparing this lecture, which was fun because I really wanted to show something new, a narrative. But it was partly I just thought we accumulated enough of this top, but I didn't know it was so much like this. But earlier stage was really, as I mentioned in the middle, it just randomly I come up with this kind of almost utopian structured circles and dome, and then it travel around. It wasn't really about the location. It's like everywhere, nowhere situation. And then slowly somehow, I think it was also interesting storyline I had was I was in New York. I was quite in a kind of a globalized context, and then come back to Korea, and then I thought I left the West, but then somehow they brought me back, and this thing went on, and then slowly I stumbled on the much more specific, much more close distance histories, and that was quite a very different mode. And simultaneously, somehow I presented it as a pavilion, but I think it's a quite two different thing. Not that it's oppositional. In fact, I try to merge this to the Serpentine Pavilion somehow. This was also idea that evolved. So for me, these two sort of frictions are has been very productive, but also, we read books, so these things, some project has interesting things. And as I said, research, sometimes it's a pure conceptual idea, but I do tend to see now, it's also interesting trajectory that like Ring Dome was one that kind of traveled around and like proliferated, but now people has to travel to look at our pavilions in the distant regions in Korea. And so I think architecture itself is not that unique or purposeful, almost like we sort of adapt this sort of attitude also under the name, word of pavilion, but yeah, we've been just kind of going back and forth. Yeah, I don't know, maybe that's. But I think, everything can be, I think that's what I wanted to convey, I think, that enriches your work.
We'll take one more question.
I really appreciated how all your projects have so much sensitivity in terms of their material use and the site, but they also have an aspect of utility in the human scale.
Also have what?
An aspect of utility for the human scale. And there are always spaces to sit in and spaces to kind of make use of. And I was wondering how you bridge that idea of a site scale to the human scale. Do you normally start with the human and go out towards the site, or do you meet somewhere in the middle with both in your design process?
I think, that's also very interesting question, but I've shown you so many things in these pavilions, especially. I think architecture, of course, you have to do much larger scale to the whole spectrum is for me very important, because I do think that the problem of the city is because two polarizing scales of like this very cell versus the for everyone but no one situation. So I do explore each project has this kind of a spectrum of me versus us, but bigger, smaller, the whole mid-range. That I think really enriches the human interaction and the city itself. But pavilions are such a small, like a little, I don't know what you call it, like moments. So often we don't think about it, but like, for example, Ring Dome was a very abstract idea, like circle with a dome, and then it become chair, the body scale. Somehow this was also a strange evolution and diversion. With also, actually, it was art trap. The Guggenheim thing was a kind of a funny thing. We thought like that. Probably like everybody that I admire was part of that exhibition, 200 of them. What should we do? And then somehow it evolved that, but later it became this amalgamation of idea. So I think pavilion with medium of this genre of pavilion has been quite freeing in a way. Yeah, you don't have this. I mean, when it becomes this whole, dormitory or museum, of course you think about every aspect, every different scale. But this was more. You can be kind of otaku about certain things. Yeah. I think you kind of it's kind of a free. What do you call that? Okay.
All right, we have to wrap up, but I'm gonna, if you'll indulge me with a short observation.
Yeah.
One of the most amazing things about using this lecture hall is the juxtaposition between our identity as architects, which we bring here to the center of MIT's plan, and MIT's identity, in this case, 8 blackboards dedicated to the mathematics of particle systems. But it is an amazing and serendipitous coincidence, because the mathematician Edward Lawrence, in a conference, I believe in 1972, although the work went back to 1961, coined the idea that the one small action within a large complex system of interlinked system of, in this case, particles in the weather system, but complex emergent systems like the world in general. He coined he was trying to coin a phrase, a metaphor for how one small action could have cascading large effects. And he first called it the seagull effect, until he was persuaded, for reasons of poetry, to call it the butterfly effect. That a flap of wings could, the flap of wings of a single seagull or butterfly could have effects on the global weather system because of the nature of complex emergent systems to diverge from original conditions. But I think it's really a really beautiful juxtaposition in the context of this amazing lecture on pavilions, the etymology of which you shared, because it is really, tonight's lecture above all was a lecture about how a relatively small piece of architecture, a relatively small intervention can have enormous social, political, and disciplinary effects as well. So I really, really thank you for an amazing lecture, and one that was very appropriate to this space and context and audience. So let's give Minsuk Cho a round of applause.
Thank you, Nicholas. That was a good ending. Wrapping up. Thank you. Okay.